everyone, welcome to the QuesterMage and welcome to today's video about the SEGA Classics Collection, but more specifically about the 3D Golden Axe on PlayStation 2. Today I want to go through what I like about this game, what I dislike, and some changes that I think would make the game overall more enjoyable. So please sit back, relax, click like, subscribe, and hopefully enjoy. Here we go. Golden Axe. From Golden Axe 1, 2, 3, or Revenge of Death Adder, these are some of my favourite beat-em-ups of all time. I will be putting in some footage in the background so you can see all these games and what they look like in case you haven't before. Golden Axe 1 being one of my favourite games of all time, but I do think the best Golden Axe ever made is Revenge of Death Adder, which you are seeing here gameplay from the Astro City Mini. I really like Golden Axe if that wasn't apparent already. One thing I didn't know is that on the PlayStation 2 we had a 3D Golden Axe. So let's see what that looks like right now. So here we are in the main menu of the collection, which houses the 3D Golden Axe, and that's the SEGA Classics Collection. Now this collection remade 8/9 games from Sega's back catalogue onto the PlayStation 2, giving them all a new look and feel. But like I said, today I want to focus specifically on Golden Axe. Now I am capturing all of this footage from an original PlayStation 2 using a LevelHike HDMI adapter. So here we are in the game and we can see that we're greeted with an intro. The intro is basically a bunch of pictures with some subtitles until we see a 3D polygon cutscene, as we can see here. Right after that, we are greeted to what I think is an excellent brand new 3D remade logo of the game itself. Look at it, I think it looks absolutely fantastic. When we start the game, we are greeted to this mode select in which we can see Arcade, versus Battle 2 player, Time Attack, Survival, and Options. If we go into the options here, we can see that we have an option to turn the rumble feature on or off whilst we're playing the game, and we have a sound test for 13 different music tracks from the game itself. So let's go back to the arcade mode and let's see what this game has to offer. Here we are, we can see the three main characters from Golden Axe itself. Starting off with Axe Battler, then Tyrus Flare, and finishing off with Gilius or Gilius Thunderhead. For this game, I generally like to play as Axe Battler, and that's what I'm going to do. So here we are in the game, so let's just start talking about what I think about it. First, let's start with the stages. I think there are 9 stages overall in this game. I do have to say that the difficulty spike is generally okay and on the easier side until you get to stages 8 and 9, where I found that the difficulty spikes up quite a bit, whether that's the enemies taking more damage or whether that's more enemies appearing on screen at once. The game itself still has an arcade credit system, so when you lose, your character loses a credit and there are 10 credits overall. But when you run out of credits, that's it, game over, so again, they are using an arcade style credit system. So when you lose all your credits, you do lose where you are in the game and you have to start it again from level 1. So with that out of the way, let me go into things that I didn't like whilst playing this game. The first thing I would say is don't play this game with the PlayStation 2's analog sticks. I found that trying to control the game with the analog sticks didn't give me that grip that I needed for the player. It just didn't have enough control for me to enjoy the game. But when you change to playing with the D-pad, I think that is an overall better experience. To be fair, that's how I like to play these games anyway. Anytime I play beat-em-ups, if I do have a D-pad available, that's how I prefer to play. But in this game specifically, I don't think the analog stick is a good way to go. Next would be that the enemies, when they appear on the edges of the screen, they have a tendency to always run at the player, which is nothing new for Golden Axe. However, in this game, I did find it harder to actually evade these attacks. You will see as I'm playing the game, you're going to see enemies running at me all the time. It tends to happen, I think, way too much. But most of the times when I try to get out of the way, you will see that the attack from the enemy actually lands more often than not. It's not impossible to move out of the way of the enemies, however, it is harder, and that is definitely something I did not like. Collecting the magic bottles or food items from the little characters that appear around the screen seemed to be overly difficult for what it should be. This is something that Golden Axe tends to do a lot. We tend to get our pickups from characters that run onto the screen, and when you interact with these characters, they drop an item that you want, and it seems to work pretty well. But in this game, it seems that those attacks seem to be quite floaty and quite hard to accurately hit the characters to collect these items. And when speaking of controls, the controls of the character you play as are fine, but sometimes seem too quick when they need to be slower, and sometimes seems too slow when it needs to be quicker. Like I was saying, evading characters, I would speed that up for the player so that we can evade easier. When you're trying to maneuver your character and move them around the game area, that seems too quick. It needs to be just slightly slower. When you're playing games like Golden Axe, I tend to find that I tend to stay within the middle of the screen. I don't know if that's how you play these games, but that's how I tend to play them. And I think that's because the enemies tend to push you into the middle of the screen, or as the camera moves forward, it has a tendency to kind of leave you in the center. However, playing Golden Axe on the PlayStation 2, I found that I just hugged the edges on the right hand side. And that's because the enemies would appear, and I think just naturally, I would want to attack those enemies as fast as possible, therefore I would stay on the right-hand side, which to me takes away from the enjoyment of playing this game. I think we should be in the middle of the game, or the game should be doing more to keep you within the center of the gameplay area. But again, as the enemies appear and they have this tendency to run at you when they appear on the other side of the screen, I just found myself hugging the right-hand side, attacking an enemy, moving away from the running enemy, and then flanking them and trying to attack both with the basic attacks. Which leads me into the way that the enemies actually maneuver on screen. I don't think it's particularly that intelligent. Enemies just tend to walk in front of you. So let's say you have two enemies on screen, one's below you and one's in front of you. As you're attacking the enemy in front of you, the other enemy has a habit of walking right in front of your character, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But when you see this again and again and again, it's kind of weird. It does make it easier, which is, I guess, good, but you do want a little bit of challenge by having enemies moving onto your offside to attack you there, to allow you to use the stronger attack, which is a square button, which attacks enemies in front and behind you at the same time. I did find, as I played the game more in stages 8 and 9, that the enemies did have a bigger tendency to surround the player. It might seem like I'm bagging on the game, but I'm not. These are just some things that I did find whilst playing the game that tended to grate on me a little bit. So let's move on to things that I liked. First of all, in my opinion, I think the graphics look nice. They're not the best graphics for Golden Axe. I still think that mantle is held by Revenge of Death Adder, but overall, I think it's okay. The transition to 3D, in my opinion, for this game didn't make it look better than the original, but it looks good for what it is. The main menu logo when you first start up the game, like I said earlier, I think it looks excellent. I think it's the best looking logo of all of the Golden Axes. The music in this game also has been remastered very well. It's very clear to listen to and very enjoyable. They're the tracks you know from the older Golden Axe titles, just now remastered, which is really, really good. The last thing that I do like is that the gameplay, even with its issues, still feels like Golden Axe. As I was playing the game, it does feel like a Golden Axe game, so that is definitely something that I liked. So let's move on to what I would fix, and then after I'll give my overall impressions of the game itself. So what would I fix in this game? Firstly, the enemy movement to me needs to be updated. The enemies need to flank the player more often than they do now, and don't just run at the player every time they appear on the opposite side of the screen. I think they need to walk into the gameplay area, and then as they get closer to the player, they run at the player. That gives us the chance to see the enemy approaching, and then we can just move out of the way, bringing more strategy into the gameplay. Another thing that I think this game could benefit from, as it's in 3D, is the attacking seems very finicky. When you have enemies that are close to you, sometimes you don't hit them, and sometimes you do. And I think a way to alleviate this issue would be to implement a 3-lane system for attacks. I'll put up some images on the screen and hopefully this idea makes sense. If we divide the gameplay area into 6 lanes, then every attack made by the player would attack any enemy within the 3 lanes that are closest to the direction that the player is facing. This coupled with slowing down all of the enemies in game to allow the player, like I said earlier, to strategize their gameplay, I think would help a lot when it comes to the overall enjoyment. this would make it more similar to the older games themselves. They didn't implement a 3-lane system like I'm calling it, but the enemies did seem to move slower on screen to give you just that time to move out of the way, use some more tactics, and enjoy the game more. To finish the video, overall, do I like Golden Axe from the SEGA Classics Collection? I would have to say, yes, I do like this game. It seems like a lot of people don't like this game, and I think that's because of comparisons to some of the best beat-em-up games of all time, and whether that be Golden Axe from the arcade consoles or the Revenge of Death Adder from the arcade. When you're comparing it with these games, it becomes very difficult to say this is a great game. I don't think it's a great game, but I do think the game is fine for what it is. Even with all of its flaws that I mentioned earlier, I still managed to have fun playing this game. Is it as good as the original? No. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely yes. Unfortunately, the game didn't hold up to the original masterpiece like I said, but I do think the PlayStation 2's 3D Golden Axe is still a game which you can have fun with playing within the Golden Axe universe. Just be prepared for the difficulty spike that appears in the end levels. So what do you think of the SEGA Classics Collection's 3D Golden Axe? Have you played it? Do you hate it? Do you love it? Do you think it's okay? Please let me know down in the comments. Let's have a discussion about it. But that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you very much again for watching. If you like what I do here, please do click that like button down below. It helps out the channel a lot. And if you want to see more, please click that subscribe button, as that is the only way this channel can grow. Now, I hope you liked this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. And until then, thanks again.